You have spoken. Slither returned for a new matchup against Gabriel from Malignant, and Slither stomped Gabby out the way Graboid stomped Slither out. It's kind of hilarious, actually. It's been a long time since I've seen this movie, and giving it a rewatch was definitely well worth it. I mean, what's there not to love about space parasites? Yes, Slither was not the first time we'd see spacefaring parasites, so much so that when the trailer released, the internet went bananas. Gunn's film was criticized for ripping off the 1986 film Night of the Creeps, also a great movie. Further beyond that, there was also claim that it ripped off the 1975 film Shivers, also known as The Parasite Murders, and They Came From Within, which was written and directed by David Cronenberg. Fucking legend. Gunn would go on to state that both Shivers and The Brood, as well as Uzumaki by Jujin Ito, were major sources of inspiration for the film. Gunn also injected little tidbits of 80s horror comedy into the film. This was not Gunn's first writing work, but it was his directorial debut, and I think it's okay for creatives to have drawn inspiration from films and stories that impacted how they grew as artists. Okay, I'll get off my soapbox now. The film itself is a horror comedy, and it follows Nathan Fillion, from Firefly and such, as Police Chief Bill Party, as he and a few others attempt to stop Michael Rooker, aka Yondu from Guardians of the Galaxy, as Grant. Yes, that is his name. The first infected and host from consuming all life until only the parasite's consciousness remain. James does love to work with the same people. Also, now that I think about it, this is pretty much Ego's plan in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, so... Okay, with that little sprinkling of backstory out of the way, let's check out the hot chick stabbing Cronenbergian destroyer of mankind and probably other planets, The Long One. First things first, I'm going to focus the features and abilities sections on The Long One, aka the Alpha, specifically on the host itself, but I will add some little information about builds for the slugs and the slug host, aka the womb, in the actual breakdown section. So the Long One's really a little tiny needle creature, which exists inside of a small pupil-looking white gelatinous casing. This stage is incredibly durable, as it's capable of surviving the vacuum of space as well as entry through a planet's atmosphere. I mean, that takes some cojones, man. Takes some cojones. This needle creature's sole purpose is to find a host. The host is the primary vessel for the Long One's consciousness, and once infected, a metamorphosis begins, transforming the host into a hentai lover's dream. Just lots of tentacles, just so many, with cutting and stabbing abilities. It's just so versatile. Once a host has been obtained, the next step for the parasite is to find another vessel to impregnate. This vessel becomes the womb, and gradually turns into a giant tick-like entity before exploding and releasing the slugs that grew inside of it. While formidable, the host becomes a little slightly less mobile as it grows, its primary threat being all those sexy little tentacles that it lashes out with. The true threat comes from the small slugs that immediately seek hosts for themselves upon birth. The hosts are subservient to the Alpha and/or the Long One, and aside from forcing infection on others, their only goal is to assimilate with the Long One. This merging of biomass is the Long One's true goal, and man, the practical effects in this movie are they're the bee's knees, man. The Long One will continue this process until it has consumed all fleshy life on the planet, and then presumably a new Long One in its little needle form will fire off into space to continue the process. It's not the most complex creature per se, but its threat varies through its life cycle, so the monster build is going to be a little bit longer this time. So, with that being said, let's build us a monster. But before we dive in, if you like this content, please consider giving me a like and a subscribe. It really helps. Comment below, say all kinds of things, algorithm, whatever that is. Alright, that's enough of that. Let's dive into this. As stated before, I'm going to give you the slugs as well as the womb before we even get into the Long One. So, first up, we have the slug, a tiny monstrosity. I did not give it an alignment because technically it's tethered to the host monster, and you can kind of play on that. I'll get into that later. Armor class of 10, hit points 10. It's got speed of 30 feet for climbing, typical run, and swimming. 10 strength, 9 int, 17 dex, 5 wisdom, 8 con, 5 charisma. Not really like the most built thing. It's a tiny little slug. It has blind sight to 150 feet with a passive perception of 7. It's a challenge rating of 1/8. No traits. It can make a basic bite attack, but its primary thing is possess. It requires a dexterity saving throw of DC 13. The slug's only purpose is to obtain a host. The target must make a dexterity saving throw. On a fail save, the slug enters the target, and within 1d4 turns, the target becomes possessed, losing all control of its body. On a success, the slug is slain. So if you succeed, you kill the slug. The Dungeon Master may use the possessed creature's stat blocks and both the physical and magical abilities of said creature. Next, we have the Sentient Womb, a large monstrosity, also no alignment. Armor class 10, hit points 22, movement speed of 5. Listen, in the movie she does move a little bit. Strength, dex, con, int, wisdom, all 10, charisma 15. Damage resistance, acid, damage vulnerabilities, fire, force, bludgeoning, slashing, piercing. Senses, it has a passive perception of 10. Challenge rating 1/8. Traits, explosive end. Upon death, the Sentient Womb explodes. All players within 30 feet must make a dexterity save, DC 15, or take 4d6 force damage. On a successful save, players take half damage. Second trait, Slugs Within. When the Sentient Womb dies, it spawns 3d20 slugs. See the slug stat block. Finally, for an action, the Sentient Womb has Wish for Death. A charisma save is required of a DC 15. The Sentient Womb is still conscious and able to speak. On each turn, the Sentient Womb may beg for death. All players within 40 feet must make a charisma check. On a failed save, the players automatically attack the Sentient Womb. Next, we have the Long One, Stage 1. Medium monstrosity, lawful evil. I took inspiration there from the Mind Flayers because of kind of how they function, but if you think that lawful evil isn't the right one, let me know in the comments below, and what do you think it should be? Armor class 13, hit point 78. Speed for climb, run, and swim 40 feet. Strength and dexterity 16, con 14, intellect 15, wisdom 12, charisma 10. Damage resistance acid, damage vulnerabilities fire and force. Blind sight to 150, and passive perception of 11. Challenge rating 3. The Long One has 2 traits, the first being host consciousness. The Long One's primary host memories still exist within its consciousness. On its turn, the Long One must make a Constitution save of a DC 17. On a failed save, the Long One will stay its attacks as the host wrestles for control. On a success, it will attack as normal. One Mind, regardless of stage, the Long One has the ability to see and speak through any creature connected to its consciousness. The Long One may also use any actions and magical abilities of assimilated creatures. The creature has a multi-attack, which makes 2 lash attacks and 1 impale. The lash attack has additional text. The target must make a strength save of DC 16 or be grappled, which then gives you the grapple ability on each turn, which does bludgeoning damage. And lastly, we have the Long One Stage 2. Again, large monstrosity, lawful evil. Armor class 15, hit points 110, movement speeds of 40 across the board. 18 strength, 14 dex, 17 con, 17 intellect, 12 wisdom, and 10 charisma. Damage resistance acid, damage vulnerabilities, force, blind sight up to 150 with a passive perception of 11, challenge rating 6. It now only has a single trait, which is One Mind, which is exactly the same as Stage 1, so I'm not going to reread it. Stage 2 now has the ability to make 3 lash attacks and 2 impale attacks. Lash still has the same grapple effect. Impale, however, has some new things to it. On 2 successful hits, the target must make a Constitution saving throw, a DC 16. On a failed save, the target is impregnated. On a successful save, the target resists the attempt. Impregnated targets take 2d6 acid damage and must make a Constitution save of a DC 15 or be mind controlled for 2 turns. Grapple functions the same. And lastly, the Long One Stage 2 has a new ability called Assimilate. The Long One commands one of its possessed to assimilate with the host biomass, healing the Long One for 24 or 4d6 damage. This may be repeated as long as there are possessed nearby. I feel like my tuning may be a little all over the place with this one, but I was kind of grappling with the idea of it growing. I think that overall this is a fun challenge. You could use this as a slow burn mechanic where there's slugs taking over and the DM can have the discretion to slow down the turning into a giant worm monster type thing to really give the players a time to kind of problem solve this. Or You can just have it be balls to the wall. This weird thing happens, somebody starts eating livestock, and now suddenly your players have to slaughter this giant monstrosity. And if they don't get to it fast enough, it becomes this huge, even bigger problem. Not to mention now they're dealing with a whole army of these host zombie things as well. I don't know, sounds pretty fun. Slither is fantastic. I feel like I haven't really had anything bad to say about most of the movies that I've covered, and yet, to be honest, Slither is still just a top tier movie. It pays homage to a genre of film I personally truly love, and writing and directing are solid. Sadly, as with the writing of this video, it's not streaming anywhere, so you have to pay for it, but it's totally worth the $4. Anyway, I'm gonna go eat an ungodly amount of meat for some reason, and also my chest is kind of itching. It's probably just a bee sting.